flame or fire emanating from the front of the aircraft. It's coming from there. Jesus, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all I was thinking is, got to get this aircraft down. And all of a sudden, an almighty explosion with a boom. I was 63, so 63% third and fourth degree burns. Yeah, for fuck's sake, just put me out of my misery and let me go. I'm not going to make it anyway, and you know damn well I'm not going to make it. She stuck the mirror in, literally in front of my face, and said, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to look at yourself. You need to get used to this." And I just couldn't believe it. I just was absolutely dumbfounded, awestruck that I'd actually survived.
In today's world, there are so many incredible and extraordinary stories of survival. Stories about fighting against the odds, overcoming the toughest situations, and never giving up. Stories that need to be told and heard. Stories that can change our perspective on life, offer us empowerment, teach us how to deal with difficulties, and give us inspiration to find inner strength. My name is Enthoven, and you're now listening to They Survived. Today I'm speaking with Jamie Hull, who was 32 when his life changed forever. He was pursuing his dream to become a pilot when his plane engine caught fire during a training flight in the US. At 1,000 feet, his cockpit was engulfed in flames, and the only way to survive was jumping from the wing. After more than 60 operations to recover from the injuries he sustained, he was determined to rebuild his life, accepting all the new challenges. So welcome, Jamie. Happy to have you as a guest today.
Yeah, it is great to be here in the heart of London, actually. Yeah, so fantastic.
For the people listening and don't see us, we're in front of the Tower of London. And today we're going to start talking about your story. Can you tell us a little bit more about your life and yourself before the plane crash?
Yeah, so I was a relatively ordinary guy, I suppose, just kind of living my life and trying to get on with it. I always had a definite thirst for action, adventure, and frankly, just getting out in the world and experiencing the wider world and what it had to offer. I was very curious, and I was the kind of guy that didn't just want to walk the walk. I wanted to actually, I beg your pardon, I didn't just want to talk the talk, but I wanted to get out there and walk
do
the
stuff,
walk and do things for real and have experiences and not just kind of sit on my laurels and wait, as it were. So I crammed a lot in to certainly my younger years. I really did. I guess when you do so, perhaps you do take some, perhaps a higher level of risk. Yeah. I joined a unit called Cambridge University Officer Training Corps. That gave me a real insight into, again, adventure that the Army could offer me. This is the military service. What was fascinating about that is that I found that effectively with service with the Army, when the going got tough, I really started to switch on, and sort of my body, my mind felt like it wanted to go up a gear, and I loved the high tempo of what the Army could offer me.
Was it also at that point already like your passion for flying started? Was it?
Yeah, that came, and it was kind of always there bubbling away in the background, but the Army was the initial sort of driving focus. And so I did a number of selections with the Parachute Regiment, which is quite an elite selection to do for the British Army in the north of England. So I did something called P Company, Parachute Regiment selection, and then I did Royal Military Academy for Sandhurst for officer training. And then I also subsequently went on to do selection for UK Special Forces.
Yes.
And then I was there with a unit doing that and having adventures again, traveling around the world, going to sort of mountain areas, jungle, even the far north to literally Arctic temperature zones down to like negative 45 degrees Celsius.
Amazing.
Yeah, and conversely, really hot environments, probably plus 45 degrees.
So it was really challenging.
Very challenging, and again worldwide. And it's not so much of a boast, but I got to have some amazing experiences as a younger man by virtue of the volunteer service that I did with the armed forces.
Yes.
UK armed forces. So I was very proud of that, and that took me up to a point where I was very much, we say, considering the future, considering what I might like to do. And I remember I loved the travel, I loved the adventure, and loved getting out there and just seeing as much of the world as possible. So I considered aviation. And so I thought, okay, this is again something that I want to try and I want to do, and effectively put my money where my mouth was, and not just talk about it, but walk the walk. So I got my visa from the US Embassy in London. Specifically, I chose to go to Florida, and I embarked on a comprehensive flying training program out there to learn to fly a light aircraft. So it was a single engine piston, and of course I started with multiple instructors to sort of teach me and give me the necessary knowledge and experience that I needed before a period of about 1 month. And then suddenly I found myself what they call PIC, so pilot in command. I'm now flying solo, and I'm in Florida airspace, and I'm doing the business every day, going up morning, afternoon, sometimes two, sometimes 3 flights a day, depending on the good meteorological weather conditions. So you do all the checks, and you check the weather, you check the radar, you have permissions to make the flight. You go out and do your checks of the aircraft to make sure it's all airworthy. And then basically the next thing you do, you're in the cockpit, again, doing pre-flight checks, talking to air traffic control, taxiing out. And on this one particular day, I was making an afternoon flight at around about 12:30 hours. It was the 19th of August, 2007. And I went full throttle down that center line in order to pull back on the stick and make the concerted effort to take off. Everything went normal.
Just a normal day with a normal routine.
Everything was fine. The weather conditions were really good. It was kind of like Simpsons weather, blue sky, few white puffy clouds, very light winds. And I'd been doing this time and time again up until this point. And so it was just another flight in the bag for me, and sort of hour building. That's what I was doing at this stage, leading towards the conclusion of my efforts training in the US, and then I would have been coming back to the UK
with a degree to fly on your own. Yes,
that's it. And I was doing private flying at that stage.
What kind of plane was it?
It was a small light aircraft.
Okay,
single engine piston. So it was a low wing aircraft with a single prop or propeller at the front. And so my goal was to finish the flight training, return to the UK, because then I had to ramp up with some military training, and I was due to actually head off out to the Middle East on a tasking with my regiment. But those ambitions never came to fruition, or it never came off, so to speak, because of what happened next. And so there I was back in the cockpit, and I'm literally at an indicated height on altimeter, above ground of approximately 1,000 feet. So I'm working in the pattern. Okay, so picture, say, a rectangular pattern in the airspace, working within that pattern, and I'm literally following the pattern as per protocol, and I'm over tower, so I'm over the top of the air traffic control. And I remember talking to air traffic control and relaying and giving my position at several points in that sky pattern in the airspace. And as I come downwind, give my position, I thought, at least I looked left out of my left-hand canopy window, and I thought I saw a thin streak of visible yellow-orange flame. And then I looked again, and I suddenly realized, that is what I think it is. It's flame or fire emanating from the front of the aircraft. It's coming from there. And as I turned now crosswind, and then finally now into wind, left banking now into wind, the fire externally was now bigger in the face of the windshield, sort of behind the windshield, but it also immediately breached down below where my feet were operating on the rudder pedals.
So you're already seeing fire.
So the flame breached the front of the cockpit down below.
Oh my God, what was in your head at that moment?
So my initial thoughts, no denying this, was actually panic.
Of course, yeah.
Because suddenly I'm now not just responsible for flying the aircraft, but I'm having to deal with the flame now lapping around my feet and my ankles.
Yes.
And I'm probably just below 1,000 feet indicated. So the fire started to build up gradually, and I'm looking down, I'm checking that, and it's and as I'm descending, and I'm literally, I know that because I'm watching altimeter spin down through 900, through 800, through 700 feet.
Yes.
And as my height is dropping, as I'm descending towards the ground, towards the active runway in the distance, the fire is building in the small confines of a 2-seater cockpit.
So your plan was moving the plane to the ground. It was like a race against time because the fire was...
My primary goal was to land the aircraft in the normal conventional sense, but the flame was all around my lower limbs and it was building up, and I had to think on my feet, and it was a really hasty moment in time, and initially, and I won't deny this, I can't lie and say I didn't care, because I was absolutely sort of panicking initially, thinking, Jesus, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And all I was thinking is, got to get this aircraft down, got to get it down, try to land it.
Yes.
But as I was doing so, and I would estimate that by the time the altimeter touched on 500 feet, the fire was now approximately halfway up the chamber of the cockpit. And I'm wearing sort of hiking boots and socks, and only stout sort of cargo pants, like men's cargo shorts to the knee. And so my lower limbs were exposed to the flame, and I'm only wearing a cotton t-shirt and a baseball cap and some sunglasses. So I'm getting mullered. My lower limbs are getting really affected by the fire, and I can sort of feel that heat. But there's so much adrenaline going off in my body because of the panic, that fight or flight response, as we call it.
Yes.
The adrenaline pumping, and I guess this is kind of masking the pain to a degree, but I'm still feeling the heat. And through that initial panic, once I got to about 500 feet and the flame is about halfway, I figured, you know what? There's another option here. I don't think I'm necessarily going to make it because of the rate of build of the fire in the cockpit. And I need to do something else here. I need to do something quickly and hastily in order to get out and stand a chance. So with that in mind, my mind quickly sort of flicked back to the training that I'd received by, the various US flight instructors. And I always remember, and I've shared this story, a number of times, that one of the US flight instructors said, and I quote, above all, if there's an emergency and you've got a problem, fly the damned aircraft. And these words kind of, they echoed and they sort of reverberated through my mind. And I thought, you know what, this is exactly what I've got to do. I've got to maintain control. I've got to fly the aircraft. But I knew that I probably didn't have time to touch down
before it went, yeah,
to roll into a full stop halt and then exit aircraft. I knew that I didn't have that much time. So I followed the protocol for the emergency drill, or the procedure for an emergency that they taught me over and over again. And if you like, it was just like any other drill, like hundreds of drills that I'd learned in the military as a special forces soldier in the past. So for example, in this case, I turned the key to the ignition off, the red switches to magnetos, Alpha and Bravo off, the master switch off, the lights off, the strobes off, the fuel selector valve, I rotate that to the off position, the fuel pump, I flick that to the off position, everything off. It sounds complex, but actually follow the dashboard from left to right.
Yeah.
Everything shut down.
But it sounds like, despite the fact that you were like freaking out, there was a sort of kind of focus.
Yeah, this is what helped me focus. Just go back to the drill, think about the emergency, how are you going to deal with it? So everything off in sequence. So my left hand on the control stick, and to control the if you like, the pitch and the elevation of the aircraft, and just gently control that aircraft. Don't be too hasty about everything. Maintain control. I flicked the throttle to the off position, and I'd already killed the engine, but the momentum on the prop was still driving to a degree. That took some time, to sort of wind down, as it were. And I'm still gliding in now. I'm having to be conscious of pitch of the aircraft, because I need to maintain glide, but also had to scrub off some airspeed, but then pitch forward again to maintain glide so that I didn't inadvertently stall the aircraft and drop out.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah? So it was a kind of a careful control of gliding and scrubbing some airspeed and then glide some more. And I just about managed to control the aircraft, I felt, and obviously speed was dropping off, so I was very conscious of stall. And then in those last moments, I'm literally focusing not on altimeter, but I'm looking forwards. I'm judging it by eye.
Yes.
Now, looking forwards, looking left, looking right. I'm looking for hazard, looking for obstacle. I'm heading for a grassy, sort of open area of grass, away from the concrete runway now, because my goal was not to land towards the concrete and do what I was about to do. In fact, heading towards the grass, very low level. I unbuckled the 3-point harness. I managed to rip off the headset, throw that in the opposite footwell. And I knew that lead then was not a hindrance, and it was out of the way, the lead for the headset. And the headset was gone. And I managed to open the left-hand canopy door to the vertical position.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah, like a Tesla car moving up. Yes.
Yeah, like a Lamborghini-style sports car. It went to the open vertical position. And then last moment, looking, and I'm literally hyperventilating because by this stage the flame was up around my face. So one eye shut and my left eye open, and hyperventilating in an attempt to prevent the flame from entering my airway. And I'm literally, but also looking, checking, hyperventilating, one eye shut to protect my eye from the flame. But I still had to see where I was going, right? And then in those last moments, approximately 50 feet, 40 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet, I describe it, I was like Jack Rabbit. I jumped onto the seat, clambered onto the seat, climbed onto the left wing. I had to climb over the door lip, through the door aperture, onto the left wing, and I just went for it. And so I put my hands above my head in prayer position. I looked out behind the wing, and I've clapped my hands above my head, feet and knees together, and I made a giant leap. And I guess to many people that's going to sound, you know, seriously far-fetched.
Yeah, to jump off of
But it was my
plane.
only decision and response in order to save my bacon, so to speak, save my skin, because I was on fire, and the fire was literally lapping my face and my scalp. I mean, in those last moments when I got onto the wing, okay, I had to turn to the left-hand position to get onto the left wing. In doing so, I faced the still momentum of the backwash of the propeller, which fanned me aggressively all the way down the right-hand side. And you'll see that I have this right-hand dominant burn. So my right scalp was fanned aggressively and burnt, you know, literally down to the bone on the right of scalp. My right shoulder was the same, my right knee.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of how the mechanics of the injury occurred and how I was burned.
Yeah.
And it was I got burned to a degree inside the cockpit, but the worst of the burn came when I climbed out of the cockpit.
Yeah.
And so therefore I didn't have the protection of the windshield. So for that split seconds on that wing, I got absolutely annihilated by the backwash of the propeller from the wind.
So you were at that moment totally, your whole body was in flames before jumping.
Apart from shorts and t-shirt and a bit of baseball cap, if you like, but I believe the baseball cap sort of got knocked off.
Yes.
And my right scalp, my right shoulder was absolutely, you know, in the English slang we say mullered.
Oh yes.
Or, you know, in soldier slang, I got mullered by the flame, and that was the life changer for me. Okay, because the burn was so deep to my shin area of the lower body that there was absolutely no way that I was ever going to run with a squadron with UK Special Forces again. I was done.
Yes.
Like the old athlete in me was stripped away
at that moment.
At that moment by the severity and the depth of the burns.
Yeah, but the decision you made, jumping off the plane, was the right decision because like minutes after that, the plane exploded, right? Yeah,
so I landed literally like a sack of spuds, like a sack of potatoes in a heap on the ground. I managed to land feet and knees together, which was, if you like, testimony to good old-fashioned British Army parachute training, which I'd done many, many times. So that gave me the, if you like, the skill to execute the jump in the cleanest way possible.
Yeah.
But I was still badly hurt. So I piled in, I then thrust forward. I face planted the grass and sharp grass in Florida. I end up with a bilateral nasal fracture, supraorbital eye socket fractures from the impact, okay, against the ground from face. I also inadvertently ruptured my large intestine in the jump, the colon, lacerated my liver, which was now bleeding and hemorrhaging internally. Multiple soft tissue lacerations from the sharp grass. Hyperextended this index finger, which fractured on contact. Also a couple of ribs. So a lot of trauma, orthopedic bone breaks, soft tissue. But the worst of it was, as I mentioned, I was 63, so 63% third and fourth degree burns. And fourth degree burns means it's down to the bone on my shin, because the shin took the longest area, the longest exposure rather to the flames when it built up in the cockpit. And I rolled around. I then looked towards the distance because I remembered immediately the danger aircraft still airborne without me. And then immediately I got myself into a protective position on the ground. So call it fetal position. Hands in front of my face, and I'm on my left side. So left ear down.
Yes.
And I just kind of couldn't help myself, but I quickly turned and looked to where she was headed. And I actually caught a glimpse of my own aircraft in the distance, and she was probably only 70 feet away. So perhaps the length of 2 London double-decker buses.
Oh,
That's
really?
all.
Yeah.
Yeah, not far away at all. And I just caught a glimpse, and then she was nose heavy, left wing down, and then she just piled in, and there was this horrible, ugly, crashing, crumpling noise where the aircraft impacted with the grass, the earth, and all this mud and everything kind of like erupted from the ground where the propeller embedded itself in the ground. And then there was a short pause, like a pregnant pause, and maybe 8 to 10 seconds. It's difficult to know, but it felt like that. And all of a sudden, an almighty explosion, sort of boom, almighty explosion. And of course, I'm approximately 70 feet away. And what I do remember, you know, the noise was incredibly deafening. The reverberation, if you will, from the shockwave from that explosion, because it literally creates a vacuum.
Yes.
So it pushed out from the site of the aircraft exploding, and the shockwave came through me and then back again, if you understand.
Yes, so you moved.
In that moment of the shockwave, I felt the air being sort of sucked out of my lung, and I couldn't breathe. For a few seconds, I'm fighting for breath, and I'm trying to get my breath, and I just couldn't breathe. And then obviously the shockwave subsided again and went back again from the vacuum. And all of a sudden, you know, the if you like, the air rushed back into the environment, and I could breathe again. And it was the most frightening experience. And of course, I'd just been badly burned. And then my immediate reaction then was to try to make more distance between me and the burning wreckage. So I crawled away in the grass. I tried to like leopard crawl, sort of military style leopard crawled through the grass. I got probably 15 feet.
Yes.
That was it. And on my hands and knees.
Were you feeling the pain?
Yes, because the grass literally was tearing my elbows, was tearing my kneecaps, and my knees and my elbows were then lacerated, and they opened up because of the sharp grass. It's not like grass in, you know, smooth grass like in the UK or in the Netherlands.
Oh, it's really dry.
It's
hard
really coarse,
yes, harsh
grass in a tropical environment such as Florida. And so my knees and my elbows got absolutely lacerated, and they were now bleeding, and I couldn't go any further. So I'm probably only now about 80 to 90 feet away from the wreckage. And then I managed to get up onto my knees to survey the wreckage. So I'm trying to look and survey the burning wreckage. It's died down a little bit, but it's still burning ferociously. It's still like a crazy inferno going on over there, like just 90 feet away. And then at that point, I'm just like, oh my God, it was like a tsunami of pain, like washed over me. The only way I can describe it, right? Tsunami, pain, just huge wave of pain just came over me. And I guess at that point, it was because the adrenaline in my body dropped off.
Yes.
And I just was done.
realization kicked in also? What happened?
The fear, the reality. My immediate reaction mentally was anger, like so much anger. What just happened in all those moments? Yeah, like the immediate reaction was, oh my God, and I was angry. I mean, I was so angry. I mean, I felt like I could take on 10 men.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
Like if I was in a bar fight, I felt like I could take on 10 men. That's how angry I was. And then that's saying something, you know, and I'd never been so angry in all my life. I felt like the Incredible Hulk. You know, I was so angry. But that was like the
shock,
the power of the moment and the reality of what had just happened to me kicking in. And it just made me so angry. But then that subsided and there was like a trigger in my mind. It was like a switch. Yeah. And then I felt the most abject grief and despair. Like I couldn't tolerate it. It was so bad, if you understand.
Yes.
And I felt the most grief and the most sadness because of the reality of what had just happened to me dawned on me. That's it. I'm screwed. My life is over. My life is done. It's never going to be the same again. You know, I'm about to die, and I'm never going to experience life. I'm never going to experience, you know, probably getting married, family. You know, my immediate family back home. You know, not going to see my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my girlfriend. My life is over, and I'm not. You know, I'm never going to have a normal life ever again. I'm probably going to die in moments. So all of this shit and this rationale started rushing into my head. And of course, with that, the grief and the despair and the sort of sorrow. The tears were like flooding out of me, running down my face. The sadness, it was just utter, total despair, like the greatest despair a human being could feel.
Was it also like this moment you were like afraid this is going to be my last moment, or you're afraid to die?
No, it was a case of I knew I was going to die. It wasn't that I was afraid I was going to die. It was like I knew that my life was over and I was about to die. But then there was a third switch within the space of about 10 minutes. That was all. So as I was there kind of hyperventilating on the ground in shock and despair, I managed to take off my shoes and my socks. I tucked my socks into my shoes, put it down on the right-hand side of me.
For what reason?
Because I figured this is one journey I'm not going to need my shoes for, right? Because I'm about to check out. So why the hell do I need shoes on my feet? You know, I'm not going anywhere. So I took my shoes and my socks off, laid it down. I laid back, put my hands across my chest, like in a sort of a cross position. And I just laid back and I pulled my knees up because I had this terrible pain in my gut torso area because of the trauma that I described from the jump. And I just waited, and I grew colder, I grew weaker with every sort of second that passed. Obviously, body fluids were probably rushing out of me at a rate of knots. I was losing a lot of fluid. I was losing a lot of blood plasma from the burn. And I was dying, and I knew that. And so the third trigger that I wanted to mention was resignation. I resigned myself to the inevitable that I was going to die. And it's almost like I was apathetic, like I didn't care anymore, because what the fuck could I do about it? It was beyond my control. There was no control at that point. So I just waited, and I figured, well, I'm about to check out, so try and remember the good stuff, yeah? Don't go on with this total grief and this total sadness. So I managed to switch it in my mind, kind of with great force, but I managed to switch it. Like, sad as it sounds, but I tried to remember the good times, and I was thinking about all that, and I was thinking about the good times, the travel, like my girlfriend at the time. I was thinking about, my mum, my father, my grandparents, all the good times and the things that kind of had made me who I was,
Yes.
My good times with the military, a lot to be thankful for, yeah? And that was kind of where I got to in my mind. And so that was the resignation. That was the third switch. And then I held on. And then all of a sudden, this kind of like, woo, 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 woo. And I thought, shit, they must be coming for me because, of what had just happened, the explosion in the distance and et cetera, et cetera. And sure enough, the siren sort of grew louder in my ears and I couldn't see anything because at this point, my eyes had reacted to there's some superficial burn to the cornea of my eye. And I literally couldn't see anything. My face was sort of swelled up like Rocky Balboa.
Yes.
You know, and I was in a dire situation, you know, obviously burned pretty much what it felt like from head to toe. And little did I realize I was 63% third and fourth degree burn. Okay. All of the orthopedic trauma and the internal trauma that I described with the torso area as well. So much going on. I was in the fight of my life. The ambulance arrived on scene, and it was like a full-scale Hollywood emergency response. 2 fire engines turned up. I think a couple of police patrol cars, an ambulance. The ambulance put me on a stretcher. The paramedic was talking to me, and I could remember that. And the radios were going off. Everybody was talking on the radios. They put me in the back of a stretcher in the ambulance, drove over some rough ground, which was obviously the grass, onto some smooth, hard standing, which would have been like the apron for the aerodrome in the distance. And then it was smooth, and then they opened the doors, the back doors for the ambulance, and there was this unmistakable sort of whoop, 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 and this downdraft, this tremendous wind and downdraft, and I thought, well, that's got to be the helicopter.
Yeah.
Right, they put me into the sliding door into the side of the helicopter, and then suddenly I'm in the back, and they close the door, and it's a little bit quieter, and there's a doctor, a US doctor, talking to me, and he goes, "Hey man, I'm Dr. Smith. I'm with you. I'm going to help to take you to the Orlando Regional, the health center, and we're going to take good care of you, James, and we're going to look after you." And this kind of went on, this kind of rhetoric from the doctor in the back of the helicopter. And then he said to me, I just need to ask you some questions, sir. Can you confirm your name? I told him my name. Can you confirm your date of birth? I told him. Do you have an insurance policy?
Oh.
Question number 3. And I'm like, yeah, for fuck's sake. Yeah, of course I have an insurance policy. You know,
strange question.
Yeah, well, that's the US, right? Oh, in the back of the helicopter, probably approximately 20, 25 minutes through Orlando airspace, I land on the roof of the medical facility. They take me down and they start asking me a load of questions. So I've got all these doctors and nurses kind of around me close. They knew that I couldn't see because of the burn to my eyes. And I was in a really bad way. I mean, I was on death's door. They basically pumped me full of fluids in the back of the helicopter to preserve the blood plasma volume to keep me alive. They'd also given me a couple of syrettes of morphine, one on the ground, one in the back of the helicopter, so that I had relatively less pain.
Yes.
But now the pain was starting to kick in again. They're asking me a few more questions. I remember then at that point I snapped and I got really angry. And I said, yeah, for fuck's sake, just put me out of my misery and let me go. Look at the state of me, for God's sake. I'm not going to make it anyway, and you know damn well I'm not going to make it.
You were so conscious, or you said you.
And I'm very much compos mentis, and I'm very much in control of the moment. And I'm having this very lucid, quite abrupt conversation now with the head surgeon. Just put me to sleep. I'll sign the papers, whatever it takes. Just put me down. I said, because I don't want this life.
Was there at that point any chance of surviving? What were the doctors telling you?
So I found out later on in due course that I was given only a 5% probability of survival based on the injury assessment, the immediate injury assessment at the time. So there's a way that they do that, but I was given only 5%. And somehow, miraculously, against all the odds, primarily because I received arguably the very best medical and trauma burns care on the planet at Orlando Regional Health Center at a cost of some $2.7 million US. So privately, thanks to insurance, etc., etc. And it isn't a boast. It's just to give the listeners an indication of what they had to do for me.
So what kind of surgeries they did? So
everything.
Okay.
Everything. So I literally had upper and lower eyelid grafts of my eyelids. Okay. And I won't tell you where they took the skin from, but, they did everything for me.
Yeah. How many months you were in hospital?
I was in hospital for 2 years, 6 months in a drug-induced coma in Florida with private medical care, the very best in the world. I had a multitude of expert surgeons and specialists 24/7 around the clock for 6 months of my life looking after me. So everything from plastic surgeons to interventional radiologists to physiotherapists to nutritionists to hematology sort of experts regarding the blood to renal experts regarding my kidneys, because my kidneys packed up and I was on dialysis. I had renal failure, septicemia, pneumonia, and I fought like literally like Jamie Hull at World War III in that hospital. And I was in the absolute fight of my life. And thanks to the expert medical care that I received and the fact that I was a young buck, I was just 32 at the time. I was as fit as a butcher's dog, so to speak, or perhaps as fit as a Premier League football player.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in great shape at the point of which I got injured. So because of who I was, because I was able to keep up that monumental fight for the initial stages of the trauma, the acute phase of the trauma, that the first 2 to 3 months,
Yes.
I managed to just about pull through by the skin of my teeth. And of course, the amazing doctors and nurses that looked after me. So there was one nurse in particular that when I said, look, just help me out, just finish me off and put me to sleep, they went away and had a conversation, and she voted against, letting me go, and basically put her hand up and said, no. She said, there's something about this guy. I see something in him, and we've got to help him. I think he's going to be with us for some time, but we need to pick up the pieces and we need to help him.
And give it a chance.
And so they did. So basically the story goes that the head surgeon, a guy called Dr. Smith, said, okay, take him down. And that meant basically take me to theatre and start working on me day one. Yeah. And the rest is history. Somehow I made it, but I owe my life to that woman.
To that decision, yeah.
It is an extraordinary event, to happen to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as an ex-soldier, trust me, I wouldn't wish it upon the enemy. And that is saying something.
Yes.
We hear about the dreadful things that go on in the world, okay, and the human atrocities and so on and so forth. And I won't get into all that today. But we hear about all the awful things that happen on this planet. But I would not wish what I went through on the enemy, because it was so hideous what I went through.
For 6 months you were in coma. Can you tell us a little bit about the moment you woke up? How was this? Maybe seeing yourself for the first time, feeling the pain again?
The first conscious memory, if you will, was at a burns unit in Chelmsford in Essex, which is just to the northeast of London. And if you like, my first alert was a nurse coming over to my bedside and saying, all right, Jamie, we've got to get you sat up in bed now. We've got to get you moving. And of course, I'm sort of under the influence of some medication and so on. And all of a sudden, this nurse steps it up a gear and she opens the window. And now it's not August 2007, it's February 2008. Are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah. 6 months have elapsed. And suddenly there's a cold rush of air as she opens the window. And the air floods in, and the cold. And that was what really woke me up, the cold. Because nobody likes being cold, right? Not when they're in their bed. So, and suddenly I'm alert to sort of pain almost from the cold air. And I'm thinking, shit, what's going on? And then she starts then talking to me more and getting through to me. She knows what she's doing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sort of starting to shiver, and she gets me a blanket, but she's starting to talk more to me. And she says, so listen, you know where you are. You're in the burns unit in Chelmsford, and we've got to get you sat up in bed, and you've got to help me here. You've got to help yourself. And I'm like in a fog of like, it's all like really foggy in my mind. So she starts to relay and tell me that, and I said, look. And I got quite angry, and I said, I remember saying, look, just piss off and leave me alone. And then she kept on. And I said, look, leave me alone. Go and get my American nurse. I'm thinking back to the conversations in Florida.
Yeah, you're thinking you're still in Florida.
And some subconscious memory. And I'm thinking I'm still in America. She said, I'm sorry, Jamie, you're not in America anymore. You're with us now. You're in the burns unit in Chelmsford. You're in Essex, in the UK. And all of a sudden it was like, everything sort of closed in.
Kicked in. Yeah.
You understand? In a moment, everything suddenly dawned on me, the reality of where I was and what I was now facing. And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, gee, I actually survived. I survived all of that. I vaguely remembered like the Florida and the hospital, like super vague because of all the drug-induced kind of condition that I was in. And it was so foggy, and I could not believe that I survived. I just couldn't believe.
It's crazy.
And then I thought back to the aircraft and what had happened, and I just couldn't believe it. I just was absolutely dumbfounded, awestruck that I'd actually survived. And that was a shock in itself. And then the next thing, the nurse was like, okay, part B here, we've got to get you sat up in bed and we've got to get you to have a look at yourself because there's been some change. And you've been through so much. I mean, you've had a lot of surgery. Remember, I'd had face skin grafts and eyelid grafts, and
still all the healing.
The surgeons had to cut off my ears because they were so badly traumatized, especially the right ear. It got so badly burned, they had to more or less cut the whole ear off. Okay. Yeah. So there'd been a lot of change, right? My face was badly swollen. I mean, I looked like the Elephant Man's brother, So the nurse brought me a mirror. She stuck the mirror in, literally in front of my face, and said, "Look, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to look at yourself. You need to get used to this." And I remember looking at myself, and this was in 2008, so really early after the trauma. And my face was like really bright red, blotchy, super swollen. I mean, I didn't even recognize myself. And
it must have been so hard.
That was tough. Yeah. I didn't even recognize myself. And I'm trying to soak it all up, thinking, Jesus Christ, is that me? Is that even me? And of course, you've got to understand, with the damage to the nerve endings, I could hardly feel anything. I put my hand to my face with the mirror. I couldn't even feel. It just felt like alien. Couldn't feel my ears because there was no sensation at that time. The nerve endings hadn't developed. I mean, now is kind of good. I can feel again, it's smooth. But back then, I couldn't even feel my face. It was swollen. There was no sensation.
Was it still also an open wound?
I just had fresh, literally what they call a major, I think it's pedicle skin flaps. They do that, they take big chunks of flesh, literally. Yeah. And I had it taken from some other areas of my body in order to sort of feed my face, as it were. So I had these big sort of fleshy skin flaps on my face to sort of, give me the soft tissue feel that I required. And this is what plastic surgeons do. Yeah. And then, of course, multiple skin grafts, human donor skin, pig skin, synthetic skin, my own skin, where they'd sort of shaved it down and replanted it, if you will.
Was this an emotional moment for you?
Hideously emotional. I mean, it goes without saying that, you look at your face in the mirror, you feel your face and you can barely feel anything. It's just numb. And going from that, I was a relatively handsome guy, before the incident. Mm-hmm. I was the kind of guy that would, not have too much difficulty, trying to, attract a girl and maybe get a girlfriend if or whatever. I had a girlfriend at the time. This was hugely emotional because I'm a changed guy and I'm still relatively young, right? Yes. I still had my whole life ahead of me, and I've got to stare at this guy in the mirror, and I'm thinking, how the hell is this guy going to make it? How the hell is he going to get on in the world? So all this, these rational thoughts, like any young man thinks on probably a daily basis, all this stuff was flooding through my mind, and I'm thinking, I'm screwed. How the hell am I going to make it? And so I didn't want to live. And this was how it was for some time. I really had to retrain the brain. Were you really thinking about ending life? I was thinking about it, yeah. I mean, not straight away. I was in the fight, if you will, kind of immediately. But the truth was, after about 18 months, so I'm in the hospital for total 2 years. But after about 1.5 years, I got to a point where I was so sick and tired of being in the fight. I was tired of the skin grafts. I was tired of the surgeon saying, we got to take you down again to debride and scrub the wounds because they're not looking good. All the infections. I was hideously infected with MRSA, C. difficile, like all these nasty hospital infections. It was a case of, you know, another operation, another surgery. I had 64 surgeries over 6.5 years of my life. The skin grafts just went on and on and on. And I was sick and tired of being in the fight. So after 1.5 years, I just said, you know what? Enough's enough. So at that point, I say to make people understand, I felt like the boxer in the ring. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't on round 12 that I've just taken a bit of a beating, but I'm still standing. Yeah. And the bell's about to go, you know, end of, fantastic. No. I was on round like 1,228 or something. And I'm so sick of taking the punches. I'm so tired of being in the fight. I couldn't do it anymore. I just wanted to throw the towel in and end it. And I even sought help. I sought assistance and means to do that. And I was in communication with Dignitas. And, you know, so I was looking to end it. You know, I was looking to go to Switzerland. And if someone had held my hand and said to me, okay, Jamie, we understand, we get it. And they'd held my hand and they'd driven me out there, because I couldn't drive myself at that point in time. Trust me, that was me. I would have gone.
How was this for your parents and your girlfriend?
It was tough. You know, it was tough because I was in a bad way. And mentally, I'd sort of closed down. Like people weren't getting through to me. The nurses could see a big change in me, and I didn't want any visitors. I didn't want anybody. The only visitor that I pretty much accepted was my mum. And sad to say, but it was only because she was bringing me food every day. And the food was better than the awful stuff that the hospital was serving up. So, you know, I was happy to see mum, I guess, just about. Because she was the only person that I kind of felt that I owed some faint respect for, because of, you know, because she was still there in my life.
Was there for you a turning point of that?
Yeah, there was. And so the reason that I guess I started to turn a corner was because somehow somebody, I think my mum found a friend through a local church, in a local minister. And this gentleman came from, strangely enough, on secondment from like deepest Africa. I think he came down from Zimbabwe. And a gentleman called Pastor Billy. In a nutshell, Pastor Billy came into my life in the hospital, and he very openly and candidly talked to me. He didn't care about what happened to me. And somehow he managed to get through to me just as a sort of an acquaintance and a friend. I didn't want a friend. I really didn't. But he managed to sort of tap into my psyche, if you will. And I guess just be a voice and somebody to talk to, somebody to listen to me. We talked about all kinds of stuff, not about what had happened to me, not about the past, not even about the future. We just talked about everything. But somehow he managed to get through to me, and he kept visiting me. And at first I thought he was like really super annoying, and I didn't particularly like the guy, but he came back the next week, and he came back the next week. And then suddenly I started to ease off a little bit, and he gave me an ultimatum, I remember. And he basically said to me, look, he said, I want you to hold on for just one calendar month. When I told him what I wanted and where I wanted to go, he said, if you hold on for me, he said, I'll help you, I'll take you. And for me, I was like, wow, someone actually listening to me, someone going to help me out, someone going to take me. And then I held on. Somehow I did it for like, you know, preceding weeks. And I didn't think I was going to be able to hold on, but I did. And then miraculously, I also went down to theatre. I had a major operation with a load of skin graft. This was human donor skin, in fact. So from recently deceased accident victim or cadaver. And they did this big op, and I was under general anaesthetic again in a big fight to come back from that.
Yes.
Because it's a huge trauma. And miraculously, I started to turn a corner. You know, the nurses one day, maybe 7 days later, they took down the dressings, observed the wound, and things were closing in. And they said to me, there's been a major change here for the good, some real development. And with that moment, I developed a pinprick of hope. There was light now at the end of a long, long, dark tunnel. I still had a long way to go, but I'm now seeing the light, and I'm now burrowing my way through this dark tunnel to get to the light, and the light grew bigger. And that's what I was heading, and that's what I was aiming for. But that journey probably took another 6 months.
Yeah.
You know.
It's so beautiful that at that point there was a little bit hope coming your way.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was hope was the primary ingredient that enabled me to rebuild the rest of my life. It was hope. Hope that I was able to hold on to, because I fought against the greatest odds. It's not just what the surgeons told me in the injury assessment or I learnt later on, but I fought against the greatest odds of human trauma and what is possible to survive, you know, in the sense of trauma.
Yes.
For a human being, that is. But ultimately, it was hope that enabled me to make those first tentative steps back out into the world once again, and then to start to accept, and to start to accept the new me, to accept the appearance, the new face,
the
new body.
How was that for you, stepping in the world again?
Unbelievably difficult, off the charts difficult, because I would, you know, and I've said this a number of times, but in reality, the bottom line is it took me 3 years to heal physically, with all the wounds and everything and the surgery. But it took me, I would suggest, 5 years mentally, about 5 years of not so much what I would call, you know, PTSD, post-traumatic stress, because that didn't haunt me, and it never did haunt me.
But about the acceptance, of the situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. The acceptance was so hard, because I'm not just saying this, but for years, you know, in the hospital, back at home, the first year number 3, so the first year back at home with my mother at the time, because I didn't have my own home initially. I looked in the mirror, you know, practically every day, like you do, and I would feel that grief, and I would just cry, because I would look at myself and I'm like, Jesus, you know, what the hell happened? How the hell am I ever going to accept this? And of course, back then my face was in a bad way, and it so much to accept, but not just how I looked. It was the fact that my life had changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
So no longer could I go back to what I loved, which was, you know, being those boots on the ground, being that soldier, and, you know, running around and getting the opportunity to go to different parts of the world and have all those kind of
adventurous experiences.
Yeah, adventure and, you know, authentic sort of action experiences in the world. No way, those days were done.
Yeah.
You know, at best I could summon the strength rather to put on my boots and my socks and limp out of the house and sort of tentatively, gingerly walk down the end of the driveway. But that's how I did it. Okay. So I pulled the socks up. I initially, you know, learnt to walk again. I walked down the end of the driveway and back, and then I walked down the end of the street and back. By the end of the year 3, I was kind of back to the former military. I wasn't as capable, no longer the same athlete, but I was now walking 8 miles per day.
Wow.
So I walked about 2,500 miles in the 3rd year.
That's so good.
Yeah, and then I managed to set myself up for some bigger challenges. So I got an opportunity to do London Marathon for charity, for the charity Help for Heroes.
So you made some goals for yourself.
Yeah, some big goals. And it took me 8.5 hours to do the marathon, right? Power walking, because I couldn't run because of nerve damage to my shin area. And
but you did it.
I got round. I power walked with all the determination that I could muster.
So you're building up your life again.
Yeah, I'm rebuilding, and this has given me not just the hope, but it's given me inspiration.
Yeah, and joy.
It's also making me realize what I'm still capable of. Okay, I might not be the same guy. I'm not going to be special forces ever again. That's not going to happen. No way. But I can still be the new guy. I can still be version 2.0.
Yeah.
And with that, I kept pushing the boundaries of what I was now capable of, because I was no longer part of that team, and I no longer had to keep up with that team. It was now my own journey and what I was capable of with the new body in the new skin.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so inspiring. You can do so much more than you think at that moment.
Yeah, so I kept pushing. That's the only way I can describe. I pushed the boundaries of the envelope.
How is it for you to, when you came back in the real world with your appearance and people maybe socially saying stuff, how is that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's not an easy thing when you have especially a changing face experience, okay? So you have to learn to accept that you look different, okay? That people recognize you because you look different, because you stand out from the norm. And so the way that I describe it, I joke about it. I feel like a bit of perhaps a B-list celebrity. You understand?
Yeah.
So when I step out into the street and I walk down the street, you know, people will look at me and then they'll look again. Why are they doing that? It's not because they're thinking, hey, there goes that famous guy. They're not. It's just because I stand out. Yeah. And they look at me because of what draws their eye. So they look at me because of the scars, say the kind of the burn pattern around the face. Maybe the ears catch their attention. Maybe the hair loss. Well, I typically wear the baseball cap to kind of protect my head from the sun and everything. But of course, I look different. And that draws people's attention. And ultimately, I'd like to think that my story can help people, right? Because if I survive something as great a magnitude of trauma as I survived, then there is a lot of hope for people out there, you know.
How long did it took you to go on the plane again? Was there were you afraid of flying?
Yeah, so initially, you know, I didn't want to go near an aircraft. But I did then subsequently go on and fly some light aircraft again in the UK.
So you flew by yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, you were not scared to go in a plane again or flying?
So, I mean, of course, initially there was some nerves and some trepidation until I kind of got the feel for things again. But on this occasion with the ballooning again, you know, I started out with the instructor and then within the third week, we landed. And then the instructor was like, okay, he said, you're ready. He said, how are you feeling? And I said, good. And he said, right, I'm going to get out. And he said, right, off you go. And then I'm like,
yeah, going.
And I burned back up to altitude.
Yeah.
And then I'm literally sat there on my own. It's a bit different in the balloon. It's like all of a sudden, you know, no burn. It's like eerily quiet. And I'm now checking altimeter. I'm 2,000 feet. And I'm on my own. And I'm just looking around. And I'm looking at the beautiful mountains, looking across to the French-Italian Alps. And it's just stunning.
Looking back at this near-death experience, what would your main message would be to people listening, struggling with their own thoughts or traumas? Or
I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and profess to say that you know it's going to be easy. That you know, just hold on in there because it's 100% achievable. Some things, you know, people are generally facing can be so hideous and so traumatic. But what I will say is, if in doubt and if in dread and if, you know, you're in a period of utter sort of grief and utter despair in your own journey, for whatever that reason might be, and I mean, you could come up with 100 examples of what could be the darkest moments for human beings. But if there's a way that you can possibly hold on, if there's a way that you can possibly lean towards your best friend or your closest family member or your children for support, because I don't think that in the darkest moments, I don't believe you can do it by yourself. I think that we need each other and we need to sometimes lean on each other. Lean, but the one thing I did learn, by all means lean, but don't lean too much. Don't lean too hard, because you can risk perhaps losing the support of friends and even family members if you lean too much. But lean by all means, and even ask for help by all means. But bear in mind that the journey and the onus of responsibility for the rest of your life is exactly that. It is your responsibility, and you therefore need to pull your socks up and drive the narrative forwards yourself. But if you believe, and if you understand that if you hold on and if you stay hungry for life, hungry for your own existence, and hungry to overcome and overcome the adversity and make good and make better.
Mm-hmm.
And the chances are you may well surprise yourself, and you may well have what it takes, the right stuff to push through, get to the other side, and then it gets better. But you've got to hold on sometimes, and that's the only way you can do it.
Thank you so much for your inspiring story and words.
It's a pleasure, Edith, and thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening to They Survived. Let us know what you think of this episode. If you're inspired by this unique and extraordinary survival story, please follow or subscribe to our podcast and check out our social media for more stories like these. Until next time, take care and don't miss the next episode.
Go away, I'll get clean, and then I get the money, and then when I come back, I'll be sorted. It's like, Goga. I was like, shit, that's definitely not supposed to be happening. You're going to get sentenced to 10 years in prison. Every day, you'd hear gunshots. You can do whatever you want except leave. 400 men on one side and 300 men on another side, all trying to kill each other with grenades and machine guns. And they'd line them up against the wall, and they would get them to drop their trousers and then beat them on the back of their legs and all that. Every day I used to think that the next day somebody would come and get me and take me out of there.